Hello there. I'm in South Croydon, just some park here. Um, I've been wanting to make this video for a while. It's about the general context of the situation nowadays in with the Ukraine and everything, which has been going on for probably a month or so, 2 months, a month and a half. It's rather interesting that there seems to be a consensus in the West that I mean, it's obvious, you know what I mean? It's obvious that Russia invaded a peaceful country, which is in itself undesirable and quite wrong, to put it bluntly. However, the phenomenon seems to have taken a sort of religious devotion towards the position regarding this war. A few days ago I went to Surbiton. I went to Surbiton and their flags, I think they were British flags or only Ukrainian flags? I think they were British flags as well. So there was Ukrainian and British flags lined up on the high street. People got stickers on their cars. I've seen some apps in the App Store have changed their colors into blue and yellow. We obviously don't want other people to, to suffer, to die in suffering, to die the worst kind of death, which is a death that you can foresee, no matter if it's war or if it's cancer. I think the worst thing is to be terrified of the thought that you're gonna die, which pretty much runs the world, to be fair. Makes the world go round. People think it's money, but why do we need money for? To keep us safe. So yeah, I want to point out a few aspects regarding this war and how it came to be. Obviously, most of you are aware in the background the issue between NATO and Russia. Basically, it's a contested issue there in the 90s that Gorbachev, which was president of Soviet Union, or whoever dealt with the negotiations when the USSR fell, was promised that NATO is not going to expand further from Germany. Didn't expand it. Obviously, Russians were not happy. They made it clear several times throughout the years. I mean, since 2000, when Putin came in, he was It was pretty clear, and it was pretty clear Russians were not happy, not even in the 90s, and further down the line they were not happy. I mean, not only Putin, but the whole political class in Russia, the whole establishment, if you want. It's strange that only Putin is being vilified now, whereas the whole parliament has been behind the decision to invade Ukraine. It's sort of like this anger towards Russia, this desire to punish Russia, to humiliate Russia, or Russian soldiers, or yesterday I've seen a video on some gore website was showing like a Russian soldier being stabbed in the head, a dead Russian soldier. Obviously you're not going to see that on the BBC, but clearly there's an anger in society towards the injustice of this war in Ukraine and the suffering of Ukrainian people, and it's been in the media for about since it started. It's been in the media. Actually, it's been hyped up since the US, Joe Biden, started hyping up the pressure, and was declaring publicly that there will be a war in Ukraine, which obviously knew beforehand because he's been sending weapons to Ukraine since December, according to Washington Post. Ukrainian military has been trained by NATO since 2014 after the Maidan revolution. So the society is quite hyped up with this war in Ukraine. Obviously there have been concerts, a lot of music stars siding with the cause of ending the war. And although all this reaction, all this polarization of society is somehow just, underneath it is a mental structure that enables this attitude, this sort of single-mindedness that the war in Ukraine is only the fault of Russia, and especially Putin alone. This thought structure that enables these conclusions and sustains this worldview and this and fuels this rage, sort of. Not everyone, but quite a few people are enraged with the war in Ukraine. I mean, when the war started, I've seen some people going to recruitment to be recruited for the war in Ukraine, and one of the guys, he didn't know where he was going even. He didn't even know the name of the country. So I'm feeling that in a way it's the masses always have something to be dissatisfied about, and with the media you can polarize and direct that anger towards a villain. They've been doing this for a long time. I mean, Putin has been doing this in Russia as well. That's how he came into power, according to most sources. So the underlying thought structure that enables this and supports and fuels this rage and this attitude, single-mindedness attitude, is the idea that of democracy, you know. I don't have data to I mean the definition of democracy, but basically being brought up in this culture, I have a perception of what democracy is, which is basically you have the freedom to speak your own mind, to decide, which way you want to go, which one to have the ability to choose elected governments or mayor or whatever, is based on free choice. It's based on the idea that you have free will, which in itself is an inheritance from the Christian thought that there is free will, that God invested you with free will, and nobody can know your thoughts, and you should decide for yourself what you want to decide. But I think this is quite a simplistic view, because we're highly interconnected and the human mind is subject to manipulation. Of course, you will have free will, but the processes that enable decision making are the same for everyone. And masses can be controlled through tailored information, and I'm sure there are technologies for crowd control. So in a way, democracy has no stable base, because you got no free will. Your free will is subject to outside input. This is why if you have an election, you will have a candidate that has 60% in the polls and the other one 40%, or I don't know, they're neck and neck or something. And then a scandal comes in, or some damaging information in the one that has the lower percentage, and he shoots up, because through manipulation of information, people can be guided to change their minds. Another feature of democracy is freedom of expression, which is the idea of free press, spoken word, free manifestations of ideas. For example, in Russia, the government is very tightly controlled from the center. So pretty much what you see on TV or, on radio, any TV station or radio, even if it's private, they have to abide by some rules and tight regulations. So only the population is only being fed what the government wants. But in the West, there's freedom. So you can choose what you want to listen to. But can you? When most of the media is owned by corporations, and even websites, at least the most popular ones, are owned by investment funds, you have to really think whether you do get free press, unbiased press. And also there's so much money in media, you know. Journalists, top journalists earn a lot of money. Someone was making a point recently that 50-60 years ago, journalist was probably the least paid profession, and now journalist has become a status symbol. So when you have people that are tied to their bottom line, you should really think whether these people have an unbiased agenda, or whether they can't be controlled, what they say, they not say, but their belief system. Because at the end of the day, they want to protect their stream of revenue. Coming back to the idea that the democracy is a cult, as you can see from what I just said earlier, there's no such thing as free press in the West. Basically, in Russia you have the press controlled by the government, and in the West you got the press controlled by the corporations and some mainstream channels like the BBC, or I don't know which one, ABC is in US, I'm not sure. So what you're going to see is a point of view that serve best the interests of the corporations in the West, and a point of view that serves best the interest of the government in Russia. So there's no such thing as free press. On top of that, in the West, people have been brainwashed into this culture, into the idea that democracy is truth. And the foundation is very strong on the fact that I have free will and I can decide for myself. This is why the West has a much more stable base in its population. This is why the belief system is much more entrenched in the West. Because if we look at geopolitics, there's no such thing as democracy. Look, I want to introduce you to someone. Look at him. He came here to grab some leaves. So what was I saying? So yeah, the foundation of democracy, free will, is entrenched in society, and people can't have any other view other than, I'm in charge of my own mind, I'm in charge of my own decisions, I'm in charge of my own decisions that I made are unbiased, are well informed, But when we look at the geopolitics, I don't really see democracy. You know, sure, Ukraine was an independent country, uh, and there's been a struggle there between different oligarchs, some of them siding with Russia, some of them siding with the US, with the West. Obviously, the idea of freedom and democracy is much more tempting than government control. I mean, we all want freedom. We all want expansion. We all want to live more. So that's why democracy is so seductive. It gives you a better standard of living, that's true. That's why I'm here in the UK. I mean, Romania is still a democratic country, but standards of living not. I mean, I don't know what the standards of living because I'm paying rent here. But if I stayed in Romania, I had my own house. But it is what it is. So coming back to the idea of democracy and the idea of free will and the seduction of democracy, and I think that's one main reason why the West is so successful, because it promises people freedom and democracy, and it's very difficult for people to say no. Very difficult to say no to more. We all want more. More. We want more. That's the promise we're being given. Which is pretty fair. It's just that as society is scaled up, an accumulation of wealth kept on building, groups of interest have hijacked democracy. And they sort of own it. I mean, you can only look at the US, whereas in their politics there have been two political parties since ages, and they're both in the pocket of corporations. And that's the problem, you know, because in Russia you know who your enemy is. I mean, in a sort of dictatorship capitalism. For example, in China, you know that Xi Jinping runs the country and the Communist Party. But in the West, the people that are pushing the levers are not in the mainstream. They control the media, they control the lobby groups, and they control the geopolitical agenda. Oftentimes they say that Russia has imperialistic views, but can't this be said about every nation? Can't this be said about us, that we want more freedom, more? We want more. Give me more. I want more! Because our freedom, you can expand your freedom as much as you want, but at some point you're gonna meet resistance. So then you're gonna have war. What I see in Ukraine happening is, for me, the view that I have is that the aim is not to bring democracy to oppressed countries or dictatorships or what have you. The aim is to expand the economic privilege Western democracies have. I always said this, you know, capitalism cannot sustain itself. It needs new markets. It needs new markets. So in order to gain access to new markets and more resources, it needs to open countries to democracy. Because then, if you would have democracy, you know, we come with our capital, with our banks, and buy your industry, modernize it. We keep our intellectual property. There's no sharing, there's none of that. There's no sharing for poor countries. We just want to buy your stuff and use your people. And yeah, and maintain the hegemony, the control, maintain everything. There's no interest in democracy. Democracy is bullshit. It's a big, big bullshit. And you can see it's a big, big bullshit because it has taken cultish characteristics, you know. We want democracy. Ukraine should have democracy, like, you're free people. They should have democracy. They should decide for themselves, yeah. It's funny, I remember the recording, the secret leaked recording of Victoria Nuland when she was on the phone with the US ambassador in Ukraine, which was uh, pointing out which people would be best suited to form the new government in 2014, you know? Yeah, democracy. So basically behind the closed doors, they were deciding which are the best people to maintain power. Yet people forget that somehow. The desire for revenge is much stronger than the desire for logic, for truth. This is because the mind is not interested in truth. The mind is interested in survival. And in relation to an ideology, to an idea like democracy, the mind is only interested to maintain that idea, that illusion, in a way. Since we spoke of the fact that you can't have democracy unless there is equality. Obviously, this idea of democracy being a threat from inequality is been popularized in the West, and there are people talk about it. It's in the press, but I feel that they're just wishy-washy. They're just playing, but it's it's like the same with Black Lives Matter. We should recognize that black people suffered. We should, stop glorifying people who made those people suffer. We should take the knee. We should take the statues down. But what about the money? Where's the money? Oh, no, we can't give them the money. We can't give them schools. We can't give them true freedom. We can't do that. No. They can have everything else. They can talk about it, they can, struggle to compete in the marketplace. They can have their own party. They can do whatever, but money, no. They can't have our money. Because that's all it is about, There's no charity in capitalism, and the aim is to maintain hegemony and infiltrate other countries with the virus of democracy. Don't get me wrong, democracy is a good thing. If people are equal, truly have equal access to education, unbiased education, and if we stop chasing ways in which to maintain the hegemony, to maintain the empire. But the thing is, the reason there's a higher standard of living, I think, in these Western countries is because of this pyramidal system. We want to maintain our advantage. We want to maintain our supremacy. We need to have the better weapons. If we have an idea, we can't share it with anyone because it's our idea. even though the Greeks invented pretty much the alphabet, right? And the Arabs invented, the numerals. But do we pay royalties to them? Because everything that's written on paper in the West is based on, on writing, on calculating. Even an issue like such as the vaccine nowadays, I'm not pro, I'm not against. I had my first dose and I'm gonna probably have the second and will do. But I was very skeptical for a long time. But even the issues with the vaccines, for example, like some African nations asked for the asked to be given the details of how to create the vaccine themselves from the Western countries, but it was refused on the grounds that things could get out of control. And yeah, but you still can do it. You can send some technicians there and help them. You can help them, set up their own laboratories and ramp up production, so Africa and poor countries can have their own vaccine. But the idea is they want to maintain control of the intellectual property. They want to maintain control of technology, because how else would they sell you stuff? And that's what it is the slavery of money. So democracy is a cult. We think our idea is better than others because we believe in truth and freedom. But actually our minds is not interested in truth. Our minds are interested in survival. Has no interest in truth. The mind has no interest in truth. Remember that. Survival is the name of the game. Actually, the mind is not interested in truth because the mind knows the truth. And the truth is death. That's what the mind is running from. That's why we build all the technology. That's why we make our life easier. That's why we fight for ideas that are flawed. That's why we fight for ideas that have been hijacked and are being used against us. It's pretty much the basis of our culture. That's why problems never stop. There's new wars and there's new reasons to go to war. And there's new reasons to sell weapons. That's what it is. It's a cult. Don't believe in it.